Hi, I'm Tash. Welcome to Tash's Library. Today's video is going to be a series update. Now, I'm not going to look at the series that I have completed or the series that I have yet to start, but I am going to be looking at series I have started and I'm either up to date with or still need to get up to date with. The first two series I want to look at are potential DNFs. The first one is The Legacy of Orisha by Tommy Adeyemi. And the first book is The Children of Blood and Bone. Now, this was an okay read. I have to say it wasn't particularly memorable for me. There were a lot of plot devices that I didn't like in this. And I've heard that people who loved the first book did not like the second book. And so I'm actually thinking I'm just going to leave this for now. Maybe one day I'll come back to it. But at this stage, there are so many other books I want to read that this is not one of them. The other series that I'm potentially going to DNF is a series that I have been listening to on audiobook. And this is The Accidental Alchemist by Gigi Pandian. And this is a fantasy series about this alchemist who has eternal life, and she comes across this gargoyle, and it's kind of like this cozy fantasy, but some things really annoy me about the main character. She has really preachy attitudes towards food, which really puts me off. And the first book was interesting. It was The Accidental Alchemist. And I'm about halfway through the second book at the moment, The Masquerading Magician. And I'm really not feeling it. And I think I'm actually going to DNF that book and leave that series for now. Having said that, if you do want a really just fun, light fantasy, it's definitely one you should check out. Next, I'm going to be looking at books that I am completely up to date with at this stage. And the first one is The Band, and this is by Nicholas Eames. The first book is Kings of the Wild. The second book is Bloody Rose, and both those books I have read. I believe there's another book yet to be released to create a trilogy, but it has not yet been released, and so I feel like I'm really up to date. For any of the people who don't know, The Band is pretty funny. It's and a very entertaining read. Bloody Rose was my favorite, but Kings of the Wild is just a very like D&D fun adventure with lots of music references. Anyone who wants a fun light read, go ahead. The second series that I'm completely up to date with is The Drowning Empire by Andrea Stewart. The first book was The Bone Shard Daughter, which follows the daughter of the emperor who has lost her memory and is going to be unable to succeed her father until she gains her memories. And the magic system is intriguing. It's about creating constructs by using shards of bone from the skulls of the citizens. And so in early childhood, each citizen has a little shard of bone removed, and then this shard gets stored. If it does get used for a construct, then it starts draining the life of the person who gave that piece of shard. So it's got some horror elements to it as well. The second book was The Bone Shard Emperor, and I absolutely loved that as well. And The Bone Shard War is coming out this year, and then that will be complete. Highly recommend the series. It is wonderful. The second series that I'm completely up to date with at this stage is Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. So you had Era 1, which was the Final Empire, The Well of Ascension, and The Hero of Ages. And then Era 2 was The Alloy of Law, Shadows of Self, Bands of Mourning, and The Lost Metal, which came out at the end of last year. And yeah, I've really enjoyed those. I did like Era 1 a little bit more than Era 2, but there are other eras yet to come. So I'm really looking forward to that. And the other one is a middle grade series. This is Nevermore by Jessica Townsend. And this is completely up to date. I've read the initial 3 books. So this is Nevermore, The Trials of Morrigan Crow, Wondersmith, The Calling of Morrigan Crow, and Hollowpox, The Hunt for Morrigan Crow. I believe there's another book that's going to be released this year, and I'm really looking forward to it. This is like a very middle grade reading Harry Potter type book where this young girl finds out that she does indeed have a power and she has to go to this magic school. It's cool. It is, the characters are really sweet and it's just a really fun read. All right, so that takes us on to the series that I have started and I'm not up to date with. And sadly, this is a very, very, very long list. So I'm not going to give much synopsis or anything for any of these. I'm just going to go through them and let you know where I'm up to with them. So the first one is the Earthsea Cycle. Now I did complete the first trilogy, which is the Earthsea Saga, Beginning of Magician. But I do plan to read the entire cycle. It is so good. I'm loving Raymond E. Feist. And I will be reading the next book, which is Daughter of the Empire, and I'm planning to read that in March, so that will set that off, hopefully. Another series that I've started fairly recently is the Alex Verus series by Benedict Jacker. And I've read Fated, which is the first book so far. Now, there's quite a lot of books at this stage. I quite enjoyed Fated. I gave it 3 stars, and I do plan to continue the series, though this isn't a high priority for me at the moment. There are other books I want to read first. Having said that, it's a really interesting urban fantasy, and if you like books with wizardy characters in an urban setting, please try this. It's really good. Another book is Binti by Nnedi Okorafor. This is a trilogy of novellas, and I've read the first one. Really, really liked it. It's African-inspired science fiction, and there's 2 to go, and I really plan to get onto those because it was a good, fun read. Another series I started was the Bobiverse by Dennis E. Taylor. I read We Are Legion, We Are Bob on audiobook, and it was okay. Now, this may be tempered by the fact that audiobook doesn't always work for me, so I have to take that into account. And it is a really humorous, intriguing science fiction, and I do plan to read the next book on ebook just to get a sense as to whether it was indeed the audiobook that stopped me from loving this. And so I do plan to continue this one. Then the Books of Babel, I started in January. These are by Josiah Bancroft, and it's a kind of quirky fantasy series about a man who's got to rescue his wife on the various levels of the Tower of Babel. I've read Senlin Ascends, and there are 3 others to go, and I will definitely get to those. I found it really fascinating, even though it made me a bit uneasy, so it's not something I'm going to binge read, but I do want to continue. The Broken Earth by N.K. Jemisin. This is a fantasy / sci-fi trilogy. So unique, so riveting. It's got earth magic, and the writing style, the way the POVs are set up are just so creative and well done. And I've read the first book, which is the 5th season, and very much plan to complete the series this year. Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. I'm a third of the way through Children of Time as we speak, and I'm quite liking it. I'm not loving it yet, so I don't know. I'm finding that the first 10% was a little bit meh. I wasn't getting into it, but as I'm progressing through the book, I'm enjoying it more and more. So I envision that this will be a series that I will indeed want to continue, and it is a trilogy with 2 more to go. Caiaphas Kane, which is a Warhammer 40,000 series by Sandy Mitchell. I have read 6 of the novels so far, and there are 10. And there are also some short stories as well, and I have read some of the short stories. These are really fun. It's a reluctant hero. It's very much inspired by Blackadder, but in a military sci-fi setting. Highly recommend it if you like Blackadder and you like military science fiction, you like Warhammer, and yeah, very, very good character. So I definitely plan to read that. Commonwealth Saga by Peter F. Hamilton. This is a duology beginning with Pandora's Star. It's a really long duology because they're about 1,200 pages each. But I quite liked Pandora's Star. I gave it 4 stars, and it was just a really fun, intriguing first contact science fiction novel, and I definitely plan to complete this with Judas Unchained this year. The Daevabad trilogy, I'm a bit shamed about. This is by S.A. Chakraborty. Beautifully written, good fun. I've read The City of Brass, and for some reason I keep putting off the other ones. I don't know why, because I really like the characters. I really like the political intrigue in it. I love the magic in it, and so I do plan to continue this series. The Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu. This is a 4-book series beginning with The Grace of Kings. I quite enjoyed The Grace of Kings. I read it in January, but I didn't love it. I found it you can look at my January wrap up if you want my thoughts on it, but it was a bit too much had a bit too much exposition for my taste. It was a bit too sweeping at this stage, a lot of setup. But I do definitely plan to continue this series because I've heard it just gets better and better and better, and I cannot wait. The Dead Djinn Universe by P. Jelly Clark. Now, I have read A Master of Djinn, which is his full-length novel in this series. At that point, I didn't realize that there were a series of novellas that came before Master of Djinn. And so I am planning to complete those. So I've already read A Dead Djinn in Cairo, which is the first one. And I do have The Haunting of Tramcar 015 on audiobook. And then I still need to try and find The Angel of Colonel Kali. And then I would have completed that. I really want to read this. I love P. Jelly Clark. And this is set in early 20th century Cairo, but it's an alternate Cairo that's full of jinn and angels, and it is fascinating. It's got some great characters, and absolutely adore this series. The Divine Cities by Robert Jackson Bennett. I started City of Stairs this month and loved it. Spoilers. No spoilers about the story. Spoilers that I loved it. And I definitely plan to continue this. This is incredible. So look out for my February wrap up for my thoughts on this series. Dogs of War by Adrian Tchaikovsky. I have read the first book, which is titled Dogs of War. And then there's a second book called Barehead. It won't take me long to read, but I'm putting it off at this stage. I'm not DNFing this because I'm intrigued by the premise, but I'm also not prioritizing it because I found Dogs of War a little bit, I don't know. I don't even really know what it was about it. I just didn't love it as much as I expected to love it. And I guess it was just the way it was written, partly, and the way the characters worked didn't work for me. But the premise of this science fiction novel is amazing, and I do plan to see where the story goes. The Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. I'm loving this series. I've read the first 10, beginning of Stormfronts, and my next book that I've got to read is Turncoat, and I definitely plan to prioritize this series this year because I really love Dresden. Obviously he has flaws in his character, but the series is so good and the other characters are so great and the story is just getting better and better and better. And I had read a number of these on audiobook. The narrator is James Masters and he's incredible, but I'm actually going to now shift to reading it in ebook because I'm finding as the story gets more and more complex and bigger that I'm missing details by listening to it on audio. So I really do need to eyeball it myself. But yes, Dresden Files, a wizard in Chicago. You can't beat it. The Earthsea Cycle by Ursula K. Le Guin. This I read when I was about 11, 12, and I adored this, and I am in the process of rereading it. I have read The Wizard of Earthsea, and I loved it. It totally stood up to my memory, and so I plan to complete this series ASAP. The Expanse by James S.A. Corey. I have read quite a number of these. These begin with Leviathan Wakes, and it's a space opera. It's wonderful. There's like political intrigue. There's great battles and great characterization. And I have really enjoyed this series, and I have 2 to go in the series. So there's 9 books. I have the last 2 to go. I plan to finish this pretty quickly. I hope. It's taken me a while, but I'm getting there. Foundation by Isaac Asimov. Was astounded by how much I enjoyed this. It has no character development in the first book, but the ideas are just so incredible, and the way the plot develops is incredible. And the second book, Foundation and Empire, was even better. It did start developing characters a little bit more, and I really am looking forward to completing this series. The Gentleman Bastards by Scott Lynch. The first book is The Lies of Loch Lamora, and that's the only one I have read at this stage. I don't own the other ones yet, and he has yet to complete the series. But I'm also not up to date. I do plan to read this, but I'm not going to prioritize it at this stage, mainly because I believe the cliffhangers on the next 2 books are a little bit more substantial. And so I'm just going to wait for a while and to see if the other books are going to be released or not, because I do have other books that I can prioritize first. Having said that, though, Lies of Loch Lamora you can totally read as a standalone, and if you want a fun, heist, grimdark, humorous book set in a city that's a little bit like Venice, highly recommend it. So good. The Great Cities by N.K. Jemisin. I read The City We Became in January and absolutely adored it. Top book so far of the year, and I totally plan to read The World We Make this year. Iron Druid Chronicles by Kevin Hearn. I have read Hounded, and this is once again an urban fantasy that follows a druid living in modern day Americas, and he has the greatest animal companion. Like, it's worth it just for the animal companion. Check it out. Really cool. The wolfhound called Oberon. brilliant, and I totally plan to continue the series. This is a great little palate cleanser. It's kind of a cozy read to me. It's a feel-good read for me, and it doesn't mean that, you know, deep, dark things don't happen in this, but I just really, like, I can immerse myself in this world, and I really enjoy it. The Kingkiller Chronicle, yes, Patrick Rothfuss, Name of the Wind. This is one of my favorite books of all time. It is so incredibly written. It's probably the best written book I've ever come across in the fantasy realm, and I absolutely adored it. The second book I also really loved, not quite as much as Name of the Wind, but it's still way up there. And the third book is yet to be released. I really hope he writes it because I really want to find out what happens. And this will be my favorite series of all time if that's the case. However, it's not up to date. And this is not Patrick Rothfuss's fault. It's because I haven't read the novella that he released, which is called The Slow Regard of Silent Things. And this follows one of the side characters. I haven't read that. I do need to read this, and then this will be up to date. The Legend of Drist series. Now I'm considering this an entire series. However, there are a few different trilogies within it. So the first 3 books are the Dark Elf trilogy, and I have finished those. And then the second trilogy is the Icewind Dale trilogy, and I've only read the first one of that. So getting onto that. I love Drist. It's such fun reading, and I totally plan to continue this book. Having said that, I think there's about 40 plus books, and they're still coming. So I don't think I'm ever going to be up to date with this. Yeah, I don't think I will be. Like, if I read 1 book a year, I'm going to be dead before I finish this series. Yeah, that's cheery, isn't it? The Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells, absolutely wonderful. Starts with All Systems Red, and I have read that on audiobook, and I've reread it as well on in paperback. And I have listened to the second and third novellas on audiobook, though I am planning to reread them all because it's so good, and I actually think I missed things in audiobook. Follows this really cool murderbot who is meant to be out there protecting people and killing people and whatnot, but he would prefer to just sit and watch soap operas. It is really light-hearted, fun reading. The Onyeka series by Tola Okogwu. This is a middle grade series starting with Onyeka and the Academy of the Sun. Absolutely adored this and plan to continue with this series. And it's about this British Nigerian girl who finds out she has superpowers and goes to a magic school in Nigeria. Highly recommend. The Rhyria Revelations by Michael J. Sullivan. I have read Theft of Swords, and I still have to read the next 2. Absolutely love Theft of Swords, and therefore will definitely be prioritizing this series. This is just a really good high fantasy. The Scholomance series by Naomi Novik. Dark academia, dark Harry Potter vibes, great little fantasy YA series, beginning with A Deadly Education. I really enjoyed A Deadly Education and do plan to continue this series. Skullduggery Pleasant, another middle grade series, this one by Derek Landy, and I have read the first 3 books in this. So that's Skullduggery Pleasant, Playing with Fire, and The Faceless Ones. And I do plan to continue this. I mean, they're really fun reads and really good palate cleansers as well. Skyward by Brandon Sanderson, a YA science fiction. So unique. I read it in February this month and loved it, and so I definitely do plan to continue this series. And at this stage, I think I've got 3 to go, plus some novellas. Yes, quite a lot, but really enjoyed it. A Song of Ice and Fire, yet another series that is not complete because George R.R. Martin is still writing it. Yes, now I am late on the bandwagon on this one. I never watched the series. Well, when I say that, I watched the first 10 minutes and found it too gory for me. And so I discontinued the series. But I have recently decided to read the books and have loved them. So I've read A Game of Thrones, I've read A Clash of Kings, and I've read part 1 of A Storm of Swords. And I totally plan to catch up with this series. I don't even care if it's not finished. I mean, I do. I would love it to be finished because I want to find out what happens. But I do really enjoy the process of reading this series. The writing's incredible. The POVs are great. And it's mind-blowing. And I'm loving that I didn't watch the series because my mind can be blown as I'm reading the series. Really good. The Sword of Shannara trilogy by Terry Brooks. I have read The Sword of Shannara and still have the Elf Stones of Shannara and the Wish Song of Shannara to read. I know there are a lot of Shannara books out there, but I plan to finish this trilogy and then see how I go, whether I'm willing to continue with Terry Brooks or not. But I did really like The Sword of Shannara, even though a lot of people said it's a bit of a rip-off of Lord of the Rings. And yes, you can see how similar they are. But you know what? I love Lord of the Rings. And I'm all okay with having something similar because I am so sad that I can't reread The Lord of the Rings for the first time again. So if something else reminds me a little bit of it, I'm happy to read it. And from what I hear, the rest of the trilogy veers a little bit from The Lord of the Rings and it becomes a little bit more unique. The Thursday Murder Club, not fantasy or sci-fi, but this is a mystery series by Richard Osman, and I have read the first book, and there's 2 others out that I have yet to read. This is a fun series about a group of people in a retirement village who get together to solve a murder. It's fun. 2 of Swords by KJ Parker. So I've read volume 1 and so I still need volume 2 and 3 to read. I didn't love reading this, but once I finished reading it, I was fascinated by how it was constructed and the way the story developed. And I am intrigued to see how this continues and what further developments come up. I do plan to finish it at some point, although it's not a top priority, and I think I keep putting it off because I don't remember loving the feeling of reading it. And yeah, I read for enjoyment. So, but I'm not DNFing this because I actually think it has a lot in it. The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. I read The Eye of the World a long time ago, and I really liked it. I enjoyed it. Then I started The Great Hunt, and I think I read probably about 15%, 20% of the book, and I just lost interest and I put it aside, and I don't know why. I was feeling like I was getting lost with some of the characters, but I also picked it up at a time where I was in a bit of a slump. Life wasn't going too well for me at the time, and so I probably didn't have the headspace for it. And I also found that I was reading it on Kindle and I was finding it difficult because I was wanting to turn the pages back to quickly see where certain names had come up, and it's quite tricky to do that on Kindle. So I think I'm going to read this in paperback and see what happens. I do want to read it. I definitely want to give this series a good go because I didn't really like the first one and I've heard such great things about this series. So yes, I shall continue one day. The Wilderwood by Hannah Witten. This is a retelling duology with strong romance elements. The romance element I didn't love. I don't like romance in novels, but I did read For the Wolf and quite enjoyed it, and enjoyed it enough that I want to finish the final book, and which is For the Throne. So I will definitely be reading that at some point. The Witcher by Andrzej Sapkowski. This, I mean, I don't need to introduce The Witcher. I think most people know The Witcher. I have read the first 2 books, which are the series of short stories. So that's The Last Wish and Sword of Destiny. I've also read the first full-length novel, Blood of Elves, and I do plan to continue this series. I love The Witcher. I absolutely adore him. He's one of my favorite characters. And probably the only criticism I had from Blood of Elves is that there wasn't more Witcher in it. But I will definitely complete this. The Rook Files by Daniel O'Malley. I am currently about a quarter of the way through The Rook, and I'm liking it. It's described as the Bourne Identity meets X-Men, and that's pretty much, like, imagine that. That's exactly what it is. Spies and superpowers. And I'm liking it, and I'm thinking that I will probably continue the series. And that's it. That's not too bad, right? It's not too bad. I mean, it's a lot of books. Like, don't get me wrong, it's a lot of books, and that doesn't even include all the series that I'm planning to start. Yeah, there's a lot of series I want to start with. I mean, I'll put the series I want to start the video in the cards for you. You can check that out. Yes, I do plan, I am planning to prioritize some of these series, definitely. Others, as I said, I'm going to maybe leave for the time being and come back to them. And then I had those couple that I'm gonna DNF. Anyway, I hope this was interesting to you. It was interesting and illuminating for me to see how much I have to read. If you enjoy my videos, please like and subscribe. And until I see you next time, take care.